Hi, welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast about how AI is changing media, news, and communication. My name's Pete Pachal, and I cover tech for a long time as a journalist, and now I have deep conversations with the media people, the builders, and the creators who are all answering the question, how do we get information in the future? And how will that change the jobs and the industries whose business is information, especially media? For most of the web's history, there was a fairly straightforward exchange. Search engines indexed information, sent people to websites, and those visits helped support advertising, subscriptions, and the creation of more information. AI is changing that exchange. Bots and agents can now read a site, summarize its work, recommend its products, answer questions based on its information, and sometimes even act on a user's behalf. The original source may receive a citation, a smaller number of visitors, or really no measurable benefit at all. That puts companies such as Akamai in a powerful position. The infrastructure sitting between a website and the rest of the internet can identify automated visitors, can decide what gets through, enforce access rules, and potentially create new systems for licensing and payment. Akamai says it processes more than 150 billion bot requests each day and has recorded more than a 300% annual increase in AI bot traffic. It is developing tools that let companies block, permit, or verify or monetize AI access while also helping brands improve how they appear in AI generated answers. My guests today work on opposite but increasingly connected sides of that problem. Kim Salem-Jackson is Akamai's Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer. She leads the company's global marketing operation and has overseen its work on measuring and improving brand visibility inside AI platforms. Patrick Sullivan is Akamai's Vice President and CTO of Security Strategy. His work includes bot management, how to identify agents, edge security, and the systems that could allow content owners to control or charge for automated access. Kim, Patrick, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Thanks for having us, Pete. We're thrilled to be here.
Nice. Good to see you both. All right. So before we get into all the tech, I would love to understand your two areas a little better. I know I summarized them just there, but I want to understand them and also how they converge around the problems I outlined. So, Kim, maybe why don't we start with you and you can begin from the marketing side. And then, Patrick, why don't you take over and explain how it looks from a security perspective?
Sure. Well, as a CMO, I think about two main things. I think about our brand and awareness, and I think about driving demand and revenue for sales. And obviously, AI has completely changed the paradigm on both sides of the coin about what I get up every morning thinking about. And the partnership between the business and IT, and in this case, working with Patrick, has never been stronger, right? As AI becomes and AI bots become one of our most important customers and our VIP visitors. So that's a little bit about macro my role and how I think about the whole world changing.
Patrick, how's it look from your end?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think on the security side, the application security team has been handed the challenge of managing bots for more than a decade. That's an area that I've been working with some of the world's largest brands to help deal with some of the threats, including sort of the relentless testing of compromised credentials on websites. That's been sort of the number one way websites get breached for most years out of the last decade. So the security team was dealt that challenge of, can you identify the bots, categorize the bots, optimize the way that you respond to the bots, and then provide monitoring and analytics. So that, we continue to see fraudsters, leveraging bots, but as Kim said, on the other end of the spectrum, now the VIP visitor to the website are the various bots uh, that really make LLMs go, right? The retrieval bots, the training bots, etc. So that is now the most important visitor.
So it sounds like, from your perspective, the change isn't just volume, it's that the nature of the bots is different. And whereas before, I imagine it wasn't universal, but generally, like, if you saw a bot, it was probably not doing good things. And now it's like, well, half the internet's bot traffic because everyone's using AI. So it's sort of a difference in kind as well as a difference in volume.
And, as a marketer, I always kept an eye on the bots. Obviously, we're Akamai and we use our own technology, but now I'm obsessed with the bots and I want to understand good bots versus bad. If the good bots, where are they coming from? As Patrick said, what are they doing? How many can I let in without my security team getting nervous that we're, letting in the bad bots? So it's interesting how even as a marketer, my obsession has changed and, I'm monitoring it all the time. Whereas before I'd probably look at it, every 6 months just to kind of understand the ebb and flow of them.
So I imagine there must be like good bots, bad bots, and sort of gray bots. How do you classify these? This is probably more your area, Patrick. But I mean, like, I guess in terms of how you're applying the filter, and then Kim, how are you interpreting what's getting through that filter?
Sure.
Why don't we start with you, Patrick?
Yeah, Pete, you nailed it. I mean, there's a whole kaleidoscope of bots, right? Starting with classically the sacrosanct bot that you don't want to mess with is the Google bot and Bing bot. You wanted to make sure that you showed up on search. Historically, then you would have some partner bots. You move your way down the spectrum. Maybe there are some aggregators and scrapers that it's okay if they're coming through as long as they don't start to become excessive or cause issues to the websites. And then, you move all the way over to the more parasitic bots that are fraudsters and competitors scraping your website. So there's always been this continuum. So we've always thought about detect the bots, which is not trivial. Categorize the bots. We have dozens of categories for the bots. And it's not about blocking the bots. It's about having, a whole menu of responses. Uh, and then also you want to make sure that you have your monitoring and analytics so you understand the implications of what you're doing. But I would say things have radically changed as I'm sure Kim's about to tell you, that optimize verb, we've added some things around making sure that the AI bots in particular get exactly what they want. And there's a feedback loop there with the monitoring and analytics.
Right. Well, come back to that thought about not just blocking. I think it's can be blocking, not always. I think is what you meant. So there's more subtlety there. But Kim, like obviously you're thinking this not just in terms of bots, but like audience, right? And who are these bots representing? What is as sort of these bots get through to sites? Like how do you interpret that?
Yeah, I mean, Pete, you nailed it. To me, the bots are my new customer, right? I think of the LLMs as a new target audience for us, which marketing has done since the beginning of time. And then, I'm also thinking about, okay, each bot or each LLM has a different personality, just like each buyer in marketing has a different personality, business or IT. So my team is not only working with Patrick and understanding what the bots are, but where they're coming from, what they're scraping, what they're doing, and how I can more precisely market to them to align to their needs. So I literally think of them as my new target audience, and I'm trying to understand their behavior, retrieval, training. I like the retrieval ones because I'm hoping they're delivering information about Akamai that's a signal to buying. That's my favorite behavior. I like to look at the volumes, and as we kind of lean into some of our GEO work, is that having an immediate correlation to more bots coming to our site as we're trying different tactics. So I am constantly monitoring that bots. I have a big welcome sign to let them in. And, I'm sure we'll get into what we're doing with our website and the bot site versus the human site. But yeah, I 100% think of them akin to a human. And the way I would target business buyers versus IT buyers, I just think of those LLMs in exactly the same way.
Right. So some people in my audience will definitely understand that the whole idea of the welcome mat and sort of making sure the good bots, I guess those
Come
are,
on in.
we're
Yeah,
throwing a lot of like judgmental terms here, but like the bots that are having a positive outcome for whatever the business goal of the site is, they would want to sort of lay out the red carpet and make sure they have a good experience. So
exactly.
that's a good chunk of my audience or comms marketing. But then there's another chunk of my audience, which is obviously publishing journalists, editors,
Yeah,
and they're like, well, wait a minute, like our business model is all based on advertising, subscriptions, and other
yep,
things that depend on traffic. Without some kind of compensation system in place, I don't know if I really even want these bots in place. So let's stay with you for a second, Kim, as you sort of think about that in terms of like who might be on the other end of whatever Akamai is managing as a CDN, and what might be available to them, and how that might, like in other words, they might be applying a different filter to the things you're talking about.
Sure, and I'll tee it up and then I'll hand it to Patrick. So obviously we have a breadth of customers and some are like me, that it just want to put out that welcome mat and others need to monetize their site, right? And really kind of allow that pay per click. And so based on, step one for us at Akamai is really to understand your business objectives, what role the bots play in your business model and how best you want to treat them and calibrate it over time. And so, that's really where we start every conversation with our customer is understanding their business objectives, their business model, and how we can meet them where they are and put the right monitoring and restrictions in place based on that.
I definitely want to hear from you next, Patrick, on this and the structure you have in place. But up until now, I think we've been sort of talking loosely because we're just having a chat here about like good and bad bots. But
Yeah,
honestly, I loved it if you could get even a little more clinical about it and
sure.
think about like the different types of bots. So it's kind of like the way I think most of my audience and I understand them is like there's essentially three main types. You have training bots, search bots, agent bots. You might think of have a different taxonomy in terms of what's relevant and how you filter, but sort of like as you think about like the different reasons a publisher might want to block or allow through, I think understanding those subtleties would be really helpful to people listening. So please let me know how your customers approach this and what you find is the best system that tends to work.
Yeah, Kim, maybe I'll take the first crack at this. Yeah, so Pete, there are many, many more categories of bots there, but
Yeah.
I think you're right. We should drill in, right? There's a whole subset that we call the AI bots, and Kim and I both have been talking about training bots, for example. So to really be specific, what the role of those bots is on behalf of the LLMs. They're out visiting websites, ingesting that information and feeding that back into the LLM such that, when an agent or somebody interfaces with a chat, they have learned, from across the web, and they're able to incorporate that knowledge that they derived, from the training bots into the response from the LLM. But Pete, you nailed that. There is a massive difference in sort of the way people think about those training bots. Kim cannot get enough, right? Like every time a training bot's coming, she's putting out
Oh,
cookies and no, come back, invite your friends because
Literal and virtual cookies.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
I
no,
get it.
exactly.
right, right, because the really for her, I'm sure she'll get into the metrics that she tracks, but the more that they come and the more that the LLMs learn about the content on the website, the more that people researching, topics that are relevant, such as, how do we protect ourselves from the latest frontier LLM security threats or other topics. If those training bots are coming to Akamai and ingesting our content effectively, we show up for those users. But Pete, to your point, there are other people who really thrive. Their whole economics are around intellectual property, and making sure that that's monetized effectively. And they look at that exact same bot uh, with the exact opposite response. They don't want that bot coming in, uh, for no monetary value, making off of that content and then monetizing it without them, right? So there, the technology is frankly much easier than the legal and business, on this side of the equation. We can do the same thing. We can detect that bot, categorize that bot, and then when we get to the optimize, rather than the optimize response that Ken will detail in a minute, uh, there, they want to maybe block the bot. Maybe they want to have a specific API because they've structured a financial agreement, where they're a specific LLM has structured a deal with a content provider. So rather than crawling, maybe they have a dedicated API, or maybe they're paying per click. Uh, those things are pretty easy for us to instrument from a technology perspective. Honestly, the hard part there are the lawyers and the business people that have to make those decisions, because it's pretty easy to say we're going to block this LLM. The business implications are far more complex. But yeah, absolutely. Different people look at the exact same bot from a 180-degree spectrum. And we can just help them implement that policy, right? We give them the analytics. And then when we get to that optimize, it is customized to the customer and their business model.
So Kim, again, the idea of these different kinds of audiences and customers that you have seems to be that even within the publishing world, like even if you do have content that is IP and valuable to you, it's not a blanket thing typically, right? That you want to block everything or protect everything. You might want to like have some content visible and some others. But I know, Patrick, you talked about training. Is training really the main thing right now? I do feel like for a lot of publishers, it's more about RAG these days because they're constantly publishing content. And I don't know, like, so maybe they block training, maybe they don't, but it's also about like the stuff that is appearing in people's answers without the need for them to go to the site anymore. Um, I don't know if the conversation is encompassing all the bots or if training is still a part of it, but like, I guess what are some of the subtleties that people can sort of put into this process given the tools that you offer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to, as Kim detailed, the shift in the web, right? It used to be you would go to a search page, click on a link in Google, and then that would navigate you to the web page. These days, if that training bot comes through there and it can, compress the information from the website, and then incorporate that into the LLM, the ratio of that training visit to actual visitors going to the LLM is brutal, right? It could be tens of thousands to one. So one training request comes in, it informs the LLM, and then tens of thousands of visitors could just go into their chat interface with their favorite LLM, and there are no subsequent calls back to the website that could be monetized, right? So that the economics for somebody trying to monetize site visits uh, can be damaged very, very significantly. And again, for that reason,
Yeah.
things like retrieval and training bots are treated pretty harshly.
Yeah, but I would guess I would ask, like, is there guidance that you give to publishers on like, well, you might want to block training and search, but not agents or all of it? Or is there are there reasons, common reasons you might want to allow one and not the other?
Yeah, a lot of there. I mean, if your model is strictly about monetizing, I think it comes down to, can you strike a content deal? It does blocking some of these bots give you more leverage to structure that deal. It's the technology is in support of the business arrangement.
Well, what about like these things where you can play for the usage or the crawls and the sort of like automatic payment or paywalling, I guess, of content from the bot internet? Is there what does Akamai offer in that regard?
Sure. So we do offer, what we call pay per click. In that model, you would look to monetize as a content provider. Every time that there is a click within the LLM. I would say in general across the industry, those models are still, uh, emergent. I think they're still starting to pick up adoption, but very early days there. I think probably more likely scenario are the content licensing deals where, again,
Mhm.
an LLM would get together with an intellectual property holder and they would structure a deal for exclusive or not exclusive use of that content. That's probably more common than the pay per click model on the internet today.
Right. And so, I guess it sort of comes down to why, right? Which is to say, like, I think a lot of AI companies or those that are in the business of, I guess you call information brokering, there's easy ways to get the information even with bot blocking in place, whatever that may be. So you might be aware that Cloudflare has taken a highly public position on publisher control. It's presented itself as kind of an advocate for changing the economics of this, the AI crawling, that is. And it's emphasized giving customers a lot of options. Um, like how does Akamai sort of see its role? Does it have a similar position? Is it a little more? Is it a different audience, different philosophical stance? Maybe Kim, you want to take this one, and maybe Patrick, let me know how it sort of plays out in the technical side.
Yeah, I mean, our view is, again, we want to meet our customers where they are based on their business objectives. So you can take a hard and fast stance, or you can adjust. I was just on a call with a retail customer who views, one of the LLMs as their competitor, and they basically wanted to take a really strict stance on that and almost block them entirely. So
Mm.
some of our competitors, take one direction, others are a little more loose. Akamai is a little more like the Switzerland. We basically, again, want to understand your model and help you adjust and block.
Yeah, Pete. I mean, I would say, if you look at sort of the delivery engine for the media industry, Akamai is at the top of the list there. On the bot side, we have a menu of those optimizations that's broader than anybody. So I would say, there certainly have been some announcements in the industry about changing the fundamental economics of pay per click. Uh, I would ask you to follow up with some of those folks on the adoption there. But I would say in general across the industry, uh, maybe some of the announcements have not been followed by quite as much adoption, and major shifts to the funding of the internet may not have followed up, with some of the pronouncements that have been made. But that's probably for somebody else to respond to.
Well, I guess what I was getting at is that there's an enforceability to this that seems like is relevant, right? Which is to say, like, if you're a major CDN, like a Cloudflare or an Akamai, that gives you real influence in the industry. Cloudflare is obviously using that to adopt an advocacy position. And is there, um, I guess, would the industry and the things you're trying to do to help your customers, particularly ones that want to block, would that be helped by either new standards or new, maybe even regulatory practices? So, for example, um, what I know this has been proposed by Tolbit, who I believe, I'm not sure if you guys are
We do.
doing
Yeah,
things with
we
them. Yeah. So in terms of bot identification, that seems to be like, at least from my conversations with them, that's a good place to start. In other words, requiring that there's a transparency to what the bot's function is, which I think most good players do. But how enforceable is that if players like Cloudflare or Akamai aren't sort of actively really encouraging that? And I guess I know you both do. It's just that where to what extent, I guess, might be the
yeah.
um the
Uh,
question.
so I think if we follow that through, the role that Akamai would play in pay per click is the technology enabler, right? So if a publisher says we want to move forward with pay per click, and the other side of that is, prevent anybody who's not participating as an AI bot. If they're not participating in pay per click, then we're going to block them. They would have to make that decision, right? That decision rests with the publishers. Uh, we're sort of the enforcement mechanism there, the detection and technology decision. So it's really not up to the bot provider or the CDN to make that decision. That's sort of the technology enabler. The business owner at a major publisher would have to say, we're willing to uh, deal with all of the repercussions of blocking LLMs that are not participating in pay per click.
Right.
And I think that's the rub and sort of maybe what's driving the current level of adoption of pay per click. But the technology is there, for publishers that want to adopt it.
Right. Okay. So just to probably my last question on this, just to say that I think it is like the security framework, taking the sort of bot identification. It's like identifying the agent, like who's behind, like who's operating it. Like, I don't know if there's an equivalent KYC with bots or anything, and then just what the purpose it is doing, right? So like that to me sounds like it would fall in the CDN, that kind of idea. Like, just what is the bot, and we want to be clear on what it is. So I guess my question would be, is there a minimum credential, I guess, for a legit AI agent? And without getting too technical, what would that be?
Yeah, so their AI agent is also a very broad category. So if you think about that,
Sure,
we
sure.
have, you know, a whole. We published a security framework for agentic bots. So we participate in partnerships with major credit card companies, major identified agent platforms. So we have the ability to understand the trust level of that agent platform, and then we also look at the identity behind that agent. Like, who's the human identity, and then there's various anti-fraud technologies we put in place there. But I guess to bring it back to kind of the framework, we do the detection, we do the categorization. uh, a customer would choose which specific optimizations are right for their business, pay per click, block. Uh, there are specific optimizations that you want to put in place. If you're Chem and you want to make sure that you show up uh, on the LLMs. So I think we'll talk about that in a minute. But there's a whole menu
Mm,
there, and that's really at the discretion of the content owner. And publishers respond very, very differently than a commerce website or a travel website or a bank. Uh, Many organizations now, their number one visitor, the reason you go to a website is to attract that AI bot so that you show up and inform the LLM about the purpose of your business. But it's very, very flexible, up to the discretion of the policy of the business.
cool. Well, let's switch tracks to that thing I know Kim's excited to talk about, which is the visibility in AI answers, and assuming again you want to be that what is offered and how you guys sort of help enable that. So I was looking this up, and it says, I guess you have an AI brand presence product that it produced an 85% increase in citations and a 364% increase in non-branded searches, 133% increase in other words, up across the board compared with various competitors. So I'm going to take those figures as I saw them, but how do you achieve this? What do you change in the back end? What are you seeing that other people don't? How does your position as a CDN give you this kind of advantage so that brands can get these kind of results?
Sure. Well, there's kind of two main components to what we look at. One is understanding, as you listed off your visibility within the LLMs, your sentiment, your citations, and then the other one is the action you take to improve it, right? And that's
Hmm.
where Akamai
Yeah.
secret sauce, being a CDN, being in security, and being able to deliver that website for the bot comes into play. So, gosh, back in the fall of 2024, I'm losing years, Pete. We saw
We
this.
all are.
Yeah, we I can't believe we've been doing it this long. We saw the sea change happening in the market, and we said, "Hey, we've got to get ahead of this," right? And so we started with the visibility journey, which is understanding where we stood vis-a-vis these LLMs on those 3 KPIs I mentioned.
Mhm.
And then the question I always say, data, insight, action. Okay, now that we understand our standing, what do we do about it? And that's when we reimagined our org, how we think about content, how we think about content placement. And we started working really, really hard to achieve those stats that you just read off. But what happened in parallel is we were focusing on understanding our visibility, reworking our content engine, reorging marketing. Patrick was working with one of our partners to kind of say, hey, how can we better serve up information to these bots so they can consume it quicker, more economically? And that's where it became kind of this perfect marriage of what we were doing. And we saw so much success on the Akamai side. And given, who we are as a company, we decided to repackage it and to sell it to all of our customers. So Akamai brand presence gives you those two components. One, helping business leaders and IT leaders, we talk to both, understand their visibility vis-a-vis the LLMs, and then more importantly, give you the ability, I call it more the
Mhm.
easier button to deliver a website specifically for bots. And the second our website for bots went live in November, we achieved incredible results. And, those are things the board cares about. I talk to our board about those every single quarter when I do a presentation. So we're super excited to have to drink our own champagne, as I like to say, and offer this to the market.
Nice. What are some fundamentals? Like basically, what are some basic things either companies, sites, brands aren't doing or are doing badly or wrong that you've found they can change, that they can start seeing better results?
Yes.
What's the lowest hanging fruit?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, AI LLMs consume only 1% of your website, right? So if you make
Mm.
the assumption that just because you have great content built and those LLMs will come, you're absolutely wrong. If you don't figure out how to optimize your site to make the consumption quicker and easier, you're dead in the water. You can have the best content strategy, you can reorg everything, but at the end of the day, it's about the LLMs being able to quickly consume your information. And that was really, I think, the secret sauce. So understanding your visibility, which is probably very low if you don't have a bot site, and then quickly standing up a site for those LLMs so you can get more of your content consumed quickly and at a better economic price.
So you mentioned efficiency there, and I understand that like the amount of data that the AI systems that they need to process is you reduce that considerably from when sort of you were first studying this. And then how do you ensure that like I guess essentially that key data hasn't been lost and it's still also like consistent with what people see? Um, yeah, how is that just technical stuff that we don't have to worry about, or is it like that just seems like a pretty impressive? Is it just something else only a CDN could do? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's by design. So the average website consumes about 200,000 tokens, and AI reads about 10,000.
Mm,
And so, what we did is prioritized our highest value content and make sure that was on our bot site as quick as possible. And then AI LLMs, they love breadth of content, they love recency of content, and they like the distribution of consistent content
mhm.
everywhere. And so underpinning having the right tools and the right site, you need to have the right ecosystem under you to make sure you can constantly feed those LLMs in the way in which they want to consume your information. I think the biggest mistake people make is they think you can do one thing or the other, but everything has to work in concert. It's an entire ecosystem it takes to feed those LLMs, right? From understanding your visibility, serving up the right content in the right places too, because a big aha we had was understanding what sources the LLMs biased. And, there were sites I could have cared less about, or even Wikipedia I haven't thought about in 15 years. Now, I love Wikipedia because the LLMs love Wikipedia. So I think understanding your stance, understanding the placement of your content, having a content machine, and then again, having that brand optimized tool to serve up the content via bot site to those LLMs is kind of the secret sauce.
Yeah, it does seem like there's at least kind of a set of sites. I see the same four cited all the time as sort of the main things that have outsized influence in LLMs, and that's like you said, Wikipedia. There's LinkedIn. There's YouTube. There's Reddit. Those seem like the big four now. Is that just kind of a natural consequence of having essentially big user generated repositories? Do you think this is something that's going to continue? Or do you feel like that might get eventually flattened out as the AI web evolves?
Yeah, I think, Pete, it's all of the above. You nailed it. I think the LLMs had an affinity to those sites because they were, raw, structured, plain content, not a lot of text, not a lot of fluff. Now the world understands what the LLMs like, which is why, we launched a bot site for LLMs, and we offer it to our customers. But I think the only constant is change in this industry. And so literally every day we're studying the market, we're studying the behaviors of the LLMs, and we're trying to ensure that we meet those LLMs where they are with, again, the right content in the right format in the right place at the right time. And, our brand presence tool, I think, gives people a leg up in achieving that quicker and easier.
Yeah, maybe I'll pick that up. I think we all know tokenomics. The cost of a token is driving more and more decisions that are being made, and these large LLMs are certainly aware of their token burn as they are conducting training or retrieval. So, to Kim's point, the version of your website that looks beautiful to a human is compelling. It has videos, it has a lot of rich content, and it's bloated from the LLM perspective. A lot of really important information that you want to show up in that LLM on behalf of your customers is sort of below uh, that token budget, basically, right? So
Mm.
Kim, was alluded to, you only get about 10,000 tokens. If really, really important information sits below that, it's invisible. It does not get ingested to the LLM. We're seeing customers experience massive business impact because they're not showing up on the LLMs. Their competitors are, they're seeing, in commerce and travel, huge revenue shift to competitors. So what I found when we started down this path was that, there were IT organizations that were building two versions or more versions of their website, one for the human and another one that was built maybe for, a bot that liked very efficient
A
HTML.
non-human.
Yeah,
Not,
and then it's worse than that. Some like Markdown, most like
Right.
HTML. So what we do is just sort of on the fly, we're making sure that bots that we know that like HTML are getting HTML that's within their budget. Those that like Markdown get Markdown. And then there's also a feedback loop. We talked about that. You detect the bots, categorize, and then you optimize. The optimize for the AI bots is to give them exactly what they want. And then the feedback loop there is, the metrics that Kim was mentioning. How are you doing relative to competitors for citations, other metrics? And then there could be content, recommendations. It's not just making sure that everything, as Kim said, everything that you have published is showing up, but also maybe there's some things that you haven't published about that you should, right? So that's what we see as kind of the full life cycle.
Nice. You mentioned on the fly there. I might understand that, like, if you're a site owner, whatever you're doing, I don't know what you have to enable on your back end, but like the idea that it's identifying a bot and then it's like spinning up kind of a very efficient version of that page with the relevant information for the bot right then and there. Is that kind of the idea?
yep.
That's the model. So as a human comes in, they get the human version because we detected that was a human. As one of these specific AI bots come in, we're going to dial up the optimization and serve
Mhm.
them, that optimized version that they want, and then capture all the analytics that Kim thrives on and is pouring over on an hourly basis of, how is the business doing from a digital marketing perspective. So that's all, part of the platform.
So, as a publisher, if you're a publisher and you have content and presumably want to have it in LLMs, or at least the LLMs that you've authorized, um, the I guess, are there any tools that are being underutilized in this regard? Do you do it like I don't want to get too nerdy here, but it is like I've recently gone to a couple of talks about snippets and that idea of sort of identifying key content, whether it is on the page, whether it's lower on the page or not, and just sort of giving emphasis to certain aspects of the content for the machine. Is that something that you think about as part of the overall way you implement things? Curious.
all day, every day. We
Sure.
are, literally updating the site every single day for humans and for bots, and always thinking about the highest value content that
Mhm.
we want to deliver to either audience. And sometimes it's slightly different, but it is it's not a, turn it on and forget it. It's an always on ecosystem that we're fueling. And the measurement aspect is critical because you need to understand how those different things you're serving out are serving you vis-a-vis your performance. And so that constant tuning is key. But having the ability to have the bot site and the human site makes it that much easier. Before it was very manual, very time consuming. And we saw immediate implications against revenue because more people are going to LLMs to buy, whereas SEO is more about research. When you go into those LLMs, you typically know what you want. You're looking for that answer. And so this gives you the ability to serve it up quickly and correctly to the LLMs.
As we start to wrap up here, I'd love to ask a couple questions maybe about standards. And I know, there's a standard called Real Simple Licensing that has been supported by a lot of groups and companies and publishers, I believe, including Akamai and Cloudflare. But basically, RSL, like, it allows publishers to essentially like put the machine readable rules for the bots and search, AI training, et cetera. I'm curious what you think might still need to happen before something like RSL becomes something meaningful and enforceable on the web.
Yeah, so I would say in general, there have always been, pages that provide suggestions to bots. This is the part of the website we want you to crawl. Here's what we want you to do elsewhere. Uh, some bots obey those suggestions. Other bots kind of treat those suggestions like the speed limit sign on the interstate, and maybe they follow it, maybe they don't. But certainly, I think it's definitely best practice to publish those instructions, and there are a lot of bots that will follow those. But there are many entities out there, many different parties, and some play closer attention to the rules than others.
What happens is even when sometimes you can't even agree on the rules, right? I mean, there was the whole row that Cloudflare versus Perplexity last year, and Perplexity was insisting that user agents were just behaving like agents, and agents can do what they want or not do what they want. But they were representing people, so they have sort of a different set of rules than search crawlers or training crawlers. And the subtleties of we don't have to rehash the whole thing, but I guess that's the point of these standards to some extent, is like, do we need new rules as we go forward for managing this stuff? RSL would seem to be something that, like you say, it sort of gives a set of instructions. You could write theoretically a set of instructions for agents, but they might not do it. And again, I guess it's coming back to the enforceability problem of, like, if someone wants them to, like, what are the tools that, or the things that, I guess, the levers that someone like Akamai can sort of pull on to sort of help them.
Yeah, I think there are always, bots that play by the rules, and then there are other, particularly when it comes to scraping and things like that, there are always bots that we've been dealing with for a decade plus that do not like to play by the rules, and you have to detect them and take enforcement into your own hands. But a lot of the larger organizations are much more likely to play by the rules.
Well, this has been great, guys. Thanks so much for dropping by. Before you go, I'd love to ask you guys a really quick question. I try to ask most of my guests, which is that, is there something about this new AI era and agent-driven internet that either keeps you up at night or you're optimistic about? Feel free to tell me both. I always like to get optimism and pessimism about what's going to happen. But why don't we start with you, Kim? Ladies first.
Sure. I would say what keeps me up at night is it is unprecedented and changing by the minute. I feel like if you take a day off, you're behind. So that would be part one. And what I'm most optimistic about is, I think, ultimately we're all striving for a better customer experience, right? And, I don't think there is a better one than LLMs delivering kind of hyper personalization, real time answers. And so I think as quickly as companies can prepare, I think the end game will be better for everybody.
Nice. Patrick, what say you?
Yeah, so Peter, I think the pessimism is pretty easy. Just working in security, probably multiple hours every day is just working with large organizations to understand the risk of the latest frontier LLMs as it pertains to finding many more vulnerabilities that we had seen before. So it's a pretty rough year to be in security with just all the vulnerabilities that everybody's facing. Yeah, definitely take care of your applications that they're having a rough go. On the optimism side, just looking at sort of the emerging, I think you touched on it, frameworks for agents, for commerce, for other things. And then also, as it pertains to, talking to an organization and saying, we don't have to publish multiple different versions of the website, manually. We can kind of leverage automation there. That's a fun conversation to have.
Nice. Sounds like you might have had early access to Mythos. I'm just guessing here. Akamai, you get your hands on that, baby?
So we work with the many of the latest frontier LLMs, but every security team out there either had access to them or they're being asked by the board how to contemplate what are the implications, when the general public, that's what everybody's worried about, when the general public gets access, all these vulnerabilities come home to roost. So that's definitely the one that keeps us up at night, no doubt about it.
Nice. If you take nothing else from this podcast, listeners, set up your two-factor auth, among other things. Guys, this has been great. Thanks so much for spending some time here on the Media Copilot.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Kim Salem-Jackson and Patrick Sullivan of Akamai. The Media Copilot is a podcast, so please follow or subscribe to us on the platform you're listening to us on. If you're on Spotify or Apple, please leave a 5-star review and a note about what you like. And if you're on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. All those things really do help the show because they put the podcast in front of more people. The Media Copilot is produced by Muso Media. Look for their link in the show notes, and don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter as well. Thanks again for being here. Seeing you in the future.